Welcome to the Erotic Realm podcast, where we explore the psychology of darker desires. I'm Em, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm a psychosexuality nerd with a background in psychology, sociology, medical science, and Tantra. I'm also in a 24/7 collared relationship, and I'm passionate about humanizing kinksters. Join me here for in-depth one-on-one conversations as we explore the fascinating world of eroticism, one erotic realm at a time. If you love what we're doing here in the erotic realm, I'd like to ask you a quick favor. Can you follow and rate the show on Spotify? It helps the show reach more people like you. And if you haven't yet, I'd love if you could subscribe to my Substack, Psychology of Desire. This is where I go even deeper into the science of symbolism, of desire, archetypes, and erotic evolution. You'll get access to articles, unique surveys and research, and behind-the-scenes access to everything we're building. Visit psychologyofdesire.substack.com. I'll see you there. And now for today's episode. The following conversation is with MistressBaton, a South African disciplinarian, sadist, and lifelong practitioner of corporal punishment. Together, we explore the psychology of female sadism, the meaning of discipline as purpose, and the delicate line between cruelty and care. From her earlier spark of sadism to her philosophy of structure and intimacy, MistressBaton shares how she understands pain not as punishment alone, but as a language of transformation. We discuss what makes a spanking scene unforgettable, why her sadism is not inherently sexual, and how research on trait sadism helps dismantle misconceptions about cruelty. Along the way, we also touch on the stigma sadists face, even within the BDSM community, and the deep psychological meaning she finds in the act of discipline. For anyone curious about the misunderstood world of disciplinarian sadism, this conversation offers rare insight into the psychology, ritual, and intimacy behind power and pain. Enjoy. Before we get started, I have a quick idea to run by everyone. I'm thinking of starting up speed dating for kinksters online. I would love to help people find their kinky partner. And at the moment, I'm just gauging interest and seeing how many people would be keen for kinky speed dating. So if this is something that interests you, I'll put a link in the episode description for a form that you can fill out to show your interest. I collect a little bit of information about you and what you're looking for. And once I receive enough interest, I will let you know next steps. It's really exciting. I'd love to help you find your kinky partner if that's what you're looking for. Now back to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Erotic Realm podcast. Today, I'm very pleased to be exploring the erotic realm of MistressBaton. Welcome, MistressBaton.
Thank you, Em, and thank you so much for letting me be on your podcast. It's a great honor, especially since I have a big soft spot for Australia. My sister lives there, and I've been there before, so I'm super excited to chat to you today.
Oh, cool. I had no idea. That's awesome. So before we dive into your erotic realm, can you share with us a bit about who you are and what you get up to in your day-to-day life?
Yes, so I'm a disciplinarian and content producer, a spanking pornographer from South Africa. I live in the Garden Route. I moved last year, October. I moved from Johannesburg, which is in the north of the country, to the Garden Route, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world, to a very small town. And so in my day-to-day life is actually quite vanilla. Maybe not that exciting for your audience to hear, but I'm a sadistic disciplinarian, and I absolutely adore spanking. And in my day-to-day life, I love very vanilla things like cooking, baking. Baking is my biggest hobby. Gym, and spending time with my dogs and watching horror movies and reading science fiction and fantasy novels.
Love it. So you mentioned being a disciplinarian. Can you go a little bit more into what that label means for you?
Yes. So I am also a dominatrix. So a disciplinarian differs from a dominatrix in terms of service offerings generally. Obviously, a dominant and BDSM professional can curate her service offerings and also her title and her description of what type of domination she does in any way she chooses. So this is not a hard and fast. This is just how I interpret it. Mm-hmm. And that is that a disciplinarian has a more limited service offering than a dominatrix generally. And it focuses on discipline, spanking, corporal punishment, and it's more formal in terms of the titles that you can call yourself traditionally. So it's titles more like governess, mistress, miss, or teacher. But people seldom call themselves just teacher as a title. So it's much more restrictive traditionally in terms of the titles as well as the practices. So it is, if I have to describe it to a vanilla person, I would say it's a less sexy version and more restricted version of a dominatrix, and not just restricted in terms of the service offerings.
Mm-hmm. So have you always been a disciplinarian, or is that a role that you grew into over time?
No, I've always been a disciplinarian. Mm-hmm. I do classify myself as a disciplinarian and a dominatrix. So, right. But my biggest passions would be more disciplinarian oriented. Mm-hmm. So I do specialize in fisting as well, which is not a traditional disciplinarian act at all, BDSM practice at all. But foot fetishism, which is also not traditionally anything related to a disciplinarian. So I do consider myself both, but mostly a disciplinarian. That's what I mostly do. Mm-hmm. So I was definitely a disciplinarian from the start, because that's my biggest passion, is spanking and caning.
Fun. So why is your chosen name MistressBaton? Does the baton hold a special place in your heart?
Yes, it's the French word for a cane.
Okay.
And the cane is my biggest BDSM obsession. I am literally obsessed with canes. I absolutely adore caning. It is my greatest BDSM passion. I can do it all day and never tire of it. So Mistress Cane just sounded a bit mundane, in my opinion. So I decided on the French word for cane.
Amazing. So what do you love about caning?
I love, just if I have to talk just about the cane, the moment I grip a cane, it makes me feel calm and focused and expectant. Just the implement itself has so many evokes so many feelings in me. I also love the cane because it is a challenge. It's not an easy implement. It is a long and thin and whippy implement. So it's a very small thing. Actually, it might be long, but it's still very small and very light. So it's a bum. Maybe some people have bigger bums or fatter bums than other people, but the target area itself is actually quite small. Doesn't matter what body type the recipient has. So it's a small target with a small implement, and to do that accurately, and if somebody wants it hard, to do it hard with skill is actually quite difficult. And I love the challenging aspect of caning as well. It challenges me in a sporty way. I also consider it a sport among not just as a BDSM activity. I do consider it a sport as far as myself goes. And And then I also obviously I am a sadist, and I adore the reactions it evokes from the bottoms.
Amazing. And you've described BDSM as not just a pastime for you, but a purpose. Can you share more about that?
Yes. In terms of a purpose, for me, it's not just fun. It is mostly. If it wasn't fun, I wouldn't have done it. So it is mostly because it is fun that I do it. But I consider it incredibly beneficial to both recipient and caner, or both top and bottom, or both dominant and submissive. Because it is such an integral part of us, and it's a positive aspect of our lives. So for me, that is what drives the purpose, the fact that it does so much good. Just to give you a silly example, once a client of mine, after I gave him a beating, he said, "Oh, thank goodness," as he was on his way to leave, he said, "Oh, thank goodness, now I won't have road rage for 2 weeks." I presume that's more or less how long his subspace lasts, or the beneficial effects of the caning and the release lasts for him. So for me, there's also a purpose to it, and it's not just fun.
Yeah, I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that now. One of the traditions of the podcast is to bring in a quote for us to explore together. And today I'd like to share a line from social psychologist Baumeister, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, from his book Masochism and the Self. He wrote, "Masochism provides an escape from self-awareness, from the burdens of identity and responsibility." When you hear this idea of masochism as an escape from self-awareness, does that resonate with your own experience? Do you feel that this is what a masochist is seeking when they have an experience with you?
Absolutely. And I think for two reasons, well, probably many more, but the two reasons I can think of now is that to a power exchange, to hand over power and control to a top that you trust, means that you can let go completely and only live in the moment. So you don't have to think. You can relinquish everything. You can relinquish all thought, because you know you will be fine. You know you will be safe. You don't have to think. You don't have to decide. You don't have to have control. And for many people, for somebody like me, I don't like feeling out of control, but I'm not a submissive, and I'm also not a masochist. But I can understand and see every time I play with people, nearly every time, I can see how incredibly beneficial it is for them to relinquish that control. So that is the one way. And the other reason I agree with that quote so much is because and this is not about submission, this is purely about masochism, specifically corporal punishment masochism, is that the pain eliminates everything else. The pain eliminates all other thought while they are receiving it. And I think that is incredibly beneficial for somebody who wants to receive the pain, because the pain is not a negative thing for them. So it's a positive thing. But pain is hectic. I mean, even if it's a hardcore masochist, it's still, they must feel that pain. And the pain is still sore. It's pain. But it's so overwhelming, it's so all-encompassing in the moment, the pain, that it drives away everything else, and they can get rid of the self in that moment, which I think is very beneficial. And I think, in my opinion, some of the only other ways one can achieve that is through meditation, or in the psychedelic research. I read a lot about psychedelic research and psychedelic research scientists. I follow a lot of them on Twitter, and I don't know if you know about the term ego death.
Yes.
which you can achieve through certain psychedelic experiences, and I'm not talking about. I'm not drug talking now. I'm talking about psychedelics as medicine. And not psychedelics as a recreational tool. So I think it's comparable to that and to meditation.
Yeah,
It's a lovely quote.
I've wondered about that as well. Do you think BDSM is almost like a psychedelic then?
Yes, I definitely think there are comparisons in terms of that you are in the moment. You cannot be anywhere else while you are busy. Even if me, not the masochist, I'm a sadist and I'm a dominant. I'm the top, but I cannot be anywhere else. For me, it is also incredibly beneficial because I have to focus very hard to make sure that the bottom is still okay, even if there's no pain involved, even if it's a session without pain, just to make sure that they are okay emotionally and to focus on not exceeding their limits. And so for me to be so incredibly focused and to have everything else disappear, very beneficial to me. And to me, it is like meditation. For me, it feels as beneficial as meditation or as a psychedelic experience. I certainly think in terms of you have to be in the moment, you can't be anywhere else, and everything else disappears. So I think there are definitely comparisons.
Beautifully said. So let's go back to the beginning of your sadism. Do you remember the first time that you felt the spark of sadism and knew it was more than curiosity?
I can't pinpoint the exact moment. I've always been interested ever since I was a little girl. When I saw in movies, Indiana Jones with his whip, and there was this TV series called North and South, in the late 80s, I think, and it was about the North and South War in North America, the war about abolishment of slavery, and and there was obviously a lot of whipping in there, which I didn't like because it was the protagonists being whipped against their will, obviously. So I'm not talking about that part. That wasn't nice. What I just found mesmerizing was whipping always in films, and there was quite a lot of it. There's quite a lot of it that one sees actually, especially in historical or period dramas on TV. Or then action stuff like Indiana Jones. I just always loved the movement of the whip through the air and the strangeness of whipping poles, and then the ground that's cleared around the whipping pole, and then usually a crowd standing in a circle and watching it, and then the wielder of the whip, the way that they just make a small little movement with their hand, and then this long thing takes on a life of its own, the whip, and moves very fast, but it also moves very sinuously and beautifully through the air. And then the damage it does, such a small thing, such a thin thing, such a wispy thing, that it can do so much damage. So I always found that incredibly mesmerizing. Also, I loved seeing corporal punishment, school corporal punishment in person. I saw a lot of it because school corporal punishment was only abolished in 1995. It was mostly boys being beaten, but I loved seeing them beaten at the front of the class. Once again, not necessarily in a sadistic way. Then I didn't want to do it to them myself or anything. I just liked seeing it. And I also saw a film when I was also quite small, I think about 5. And it was, I can't even remember the movie name or anything of the sort. It was in a desert country, and this pauper was in love with the princess. It was sort of a Middle Eastern thing, and the type of clothing they wore. And then he visited the princess in her chambers one evening, and he was caught. And the next morning, he was beaten on the soles of his feet. It was a long bamboo pole held by two guards, and another one was beating him with a long bamboo stick on his feet. And afterwards, his feet had to be bandaged very thickly in white linen wraps, which he bled through, which is a bit unrealistic, actually. Now that I know more about Bastarnado. And he battled to walks, and I loved seeing all of that, even though he was the protagonist. So I didn't like that part, that the protagonist is being beaten, but I liked the beating part. I liked seeing him limp away afterwards, a shot of him from the back walking with difficulty. I loved seeing all of that. So I can't pinpoint the exact trigger, but it is only when I first did a caning that I would have considered myself a sadist. I was always interested in it. I always wanted to do it in my adulthood, but I wouldn't have classified myself as a sadist until I actually started doing it. Mm-hmm. Because the word sadist does have negative connotations, especially if you've never done it before. The word sadist, it's something that's usually you only hear the word or read about the word sadist if you're in the vanilla life. If it's about a serial killer or things like that, he was a psychopath and a sadist and this and that. So the word sadist does not have a positive connotation in the vanilla realm at all. So I would not have thought that I'm a sadist, even though I was interested in spanking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like we need a new word for sadism, so it's not related to that anymore. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree.
So many people actually conflate sadism with sexuality, but you've said that your sadism is not sexual in nature. How do you see the difference between erotic sadism and the disciplinary sadism that drives you?
So I derive intense excitement and pleasure from my sadism, but it's not of a sexual nature at all. It does not excite me sexually. It does not make me horny. Mm-hmm. It's also not a part of my sex life. So for me, the two are completely separate. It's nothing in the no BDSM practice makes me horny. It is pleasurable, some more than others, in terms of, I think if I thought about it differently, it could have been sexually pleasurable, like somebody licking my feet or under my armpits. So it's very pleasurable, but it's not. It's still not sexual for me, so I love it intensely, and my sadism and spanking, caning, fisting, all of it. I find it very dramatic, all of it, and exciting, but just not in a sexual way.
So can I ask, is it more like a sensation enjoyment, sensation seeking for you in a way?
Sensation, and I think I love the high, the top space high that I get from the extreme nature of the act that I am committing. So when I am elbow deep in somebody's ass, the extreme focus that I'm in order to still do it safely, because it can be obviously very dangerous. The tightness of it, it feels as if what I imagine a boa constrictor would feel like. The deeper you go in into somebody's ass with a fisting, the tighter it gets, and if you go very deep, more or less up to the elbow and higher, it starts hurting you. If you stay in there for too long, you have to come out I certainly have to every few minutes, and take a break and then go plunge in again, basically. So I just love all and then there's lube everywhere and, long gloves and so I love the sensations. I love the warmth, just in terms of fisting, for example. I'm just, so I love the warmth inside and the fact that I can feel somebody's heartbeat while I'm inside their ass. I can literally feel it pulsing against me, against my skin. So I absolutely adore all of those sensations, yes. And also the extreme nature of what I'm doing excites me a lot. And then also the focus and the intense focus makes me go into top space, but usually afterwards. Well, I'm in top space while I do it, but I don't allow the rush to overcome me at all. I only allow that afterwards because I don't want to become confused by top space rush and maybe go into dangerous territory where I won't be able to make safe decisions any longer. So I always only sort of allow the rush in afterwards. But I love that rush. I love the top space rush. And then also just in terms of caning, I love that, especially the type of caning that I specialize in, which is judicial caning. So I have a blood fetish. So I love the blood. I love the cuts. I love it aesthetically. I love it in every way. And I love the intense subspace the bottoms go into, especially with extreme corporal punishment, extreme impact play like judicial caning. I love it when they get off the caning bench and their eyes literally hang half-mast from... It often looks like people are stoned afterwards, from the endorphins rushing through their system. Or, sometimes or often you get somebody who's very shy or introverted and more sort of a quiet person, and then suddenly when they go into subspace, they become literally like a motor mouth. You cannot shut them up. And I just love the fact that it allows them to be somebody completely different, or allows that release for them, where they can just let go. So I love it for the bottom's sake. I get my pleasure from the bottom's pleasure. I get my pleasure from what it looks like aesthetically. I get my pleasure from the sensations. I get my pleasure from the focus I have to maintain in order to do it correctly and accurately and safely. And I love the top space rush. So I love all of that. It's just not sexual.
Understood.
That's where I get my pleasure from.
Thank you for explaining it so clearly. It's really interesting to hear. So another tradition that we have on the podcast is exploring a research article with you. And for today, I came across a fascinating study. It's titled Trait Sadism in BDSM Practitioners and Non-Practitioners. And it's one of the first studies that really looked at the difference between people who practice sadism in consensual BDSM and people who score high in what psychologists call trait sadism, which is everyday enjoyment of cruelty or harming others in a non-consensual context. So what they found was striking. BDSM practitioners actually scored lower on the dark personality traits like narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism compared to people who don't practice BDSM. So in other words, consensual sadists aren't people who enjoy cruelty in everyday life, which is what a lot of people might think when they first hear those words. Their sadism is usually expressed in negotiated, ethical, and pro-social ways. So I wanted to ask you, do you feel that people often confuse your consensual sadism with cruelty? Do they assume that you're a cruel person?
Vanilla people actually mostly not people I talk to. So I was outed by a cyber stalker nearly 11 years ago, and there's a reason why I'm telling you this. So my vanilla career I still dabble in it from time to time, but I prefer this career that I'm doing now. But I was a TV actress and a TV presenter, so I was very well known in South Africa, and it was in the newspapers. Everybody knew, and even my grandmother had to read about it in the
Oh my
newspapers.
goodness.
Unfortunate, yeah. Somebody, my parents knew, my sister knew, my husband knew, my children knew. Many people close to me knew already, but unfortunately, it's not something I ever planned to discuss with my grandmother. It's not necessary that she knew. But then when she was at church, the day that it came out, the first article came out in the outing me. It was in the biggest Afrikaans Sunday newspaper in the country. And somebody slid the newspaper underneath her door in the old age home open on that page. So she phoned me in tears and asked me, what does this mean? And I said to her, it's not possible for me to explain it. I'm okay, but it's not possible to explain it over the phone. The next day I fetched her for a 2-day sleepover, and it took a 6-hour conversation for me to explain it, because she was 89 years old at that stage. So it was not in her frame of reference. She's never heard of it before, not at all. So she didn't know anything. So I had to explain to her what BDSM is first. And then in that vast realm of BDSM with so many thousands of fetishes, BDSM practices, roles, etc., I had to explain to her what I do, what I am in the BDSM realm, what my title is, what my role is, I had to explain absolutely everything to her, and my triggers and everything. And then she understood. But so I am, and also a lot of people, so everybody knows what I do. I don't hide it at all. I'm not in the closet at all. I couldn't, because I was outed. But not that I want to know any longer anyway. I don't want to hide it. So I have become quite good at explaining to vanillas in as few words as possible that it's not deviant, it's not violence, it's not evil, it's not any of those things. So I myself, to answer your question, I don't get that sort of confusion where people would think that I would enjoy beating them, a random person, just there and then, or seeing them hurt, or seeing, I don't know, innocent people who's not in a BDSM safe, sane, consensual adult environment being hurt. So I don't experience any of that. No.
Amazing story. Thank you for sharing. So the study also suggests that consensual sadists are motivated by play, structure, and intimacy rather than cruelty. Does play, structure, and intimacy adequately sum up your experience as a sadist?
Yes. Would you name it? It's intimacy, play, and
structure.
Oh, absolutely. So in my opinion, BDSM, even if it's just a single play that you're doing with a stranger, for me, I very seldom go to events, so I don't have often do plays where it hasn't been very meticulously negotiated up front. I don't really like events for different reasons, but the biggest reason is at events you can't if I'm playing with a stranger at an event specifically, I don't know how much they've had to drink. It's not always possible to see how inebriated people is. It's easy to see if you know somebody well. You can easily see if they've had a few too many, but not in a not at an event. So the structure is a big part, especially considering that I am mostly booked for, if I'm booked for corporal punishment sessions, it's mostly for on the harder side of the spectrum, and for me, I have to structure it very carefully so as not to overwhelm somebody, and to do it safely, and to plan it properly so that they don't start bleeding too soon, and then I have to stop for safety reasons. For many reasons, I am very big into structure. And then play. Yes, play as well, because ultimately I see everything we do in the BDSM realm as play, and I associate play with fun. So for me, it still has to be fun, even though it is a serious stuff that we're busy with. And with serious, I mean just in order to do it safely, because I tend to play on the more extreme side of the spectrum often. So for me, it is a very serious matter, but it still is play. And also just play literally. It is just another word for session, or and then the third term that you mentioned, intimacy. Mm-hmm. It is a very intimate, just for obvious and superficial reasons. Obviously, it's very intimate because you see often a stranger that you've never met before. You immediately see them naked, or at least semi-naked. So there is nothing that they can hide behind in vanilla life or in ordinary life. There's people do use a lot of things to protect themselves or to hide certain aspects of themselves behind clothing, behind expensive jewelry, behind a certain facade. There's status symbols, car or watches and wedding rings, or things that put them in boxes, or their career, whatever, careers, or all sorts of things. And in the BDSM environment, there's nothing of the sort. So soon after greeting, they are ordered to strip, because they have to be naked. Otherwise, I can't cane them. I don't cane over clothing. So if somebody is, for whatever reason, don't want to be completely nude, I respect that, but then they must wear a G-string. I don't cane over clothes at all. In the first place, to protect my canes, which are very expensive usually, from buttons on pants or stuff like that, and also so that I can see where I go. I need to see where the coccyx is, etc. So people are mostly nude, so there's nothing to hide behind. They only have their personality. It's only that, and that immediately forces an intimacy, even if it's a stranger that you've just met for the first time. So we might have spoken over email, and we did the pre-play negotiations very thoroughly over email, but this is the first time we meet in person, so it forces, and in this instance, force is not a negative word. It just forces intimacy much faster than it would. Usually you have to be friends with somebody for a long time, or lovers for a while before you get that sort of intimacy. Even though it's a different type of intimacy, the BDSM session environment, it is still incredibly intimate. And then obviously when people go into subspace, the bottoms go into subspace like that, what often happens is that, well, what actually mostly happens is that when I said to you about the motor melting earlier, and people start sharing a lot. They do often. It's often their greatest desire, or their most hidden desire, that they share only with you. The fact that they want to be spanked, they want to be caned, and very often people hide it from their wife or their partner, which is something I don't judge at all, because I can understand why. Because of prejudice, people are ignorant and prejudiced about BDSM. We are a subculture that are often vilified, so I can understand if people don't tell their partners. So nobody knows about this hidden desire except me. So it's such an incredibly intimate thing for them to share with me. And
okay, so we've talked about stigma in the vanilla world. You've also mentioned that there's prejudice even within the BDSM subculture about extreme corporal punishment. What kinds of misconceptions do you come up against most often in the BDSM community?
People just saying that it's too much. Also in the BDSM community, people are very ignorant about scarring and what causes scarring. Even in the spanking community, there's a lot of ignorance about scarring, how to prevent scarring, or people think that what I do is going to cause scars when they see the caning cuts. It can easily scar if you don't know what you're doing. But so in terms of scarring, or just people just thinking that it's too much, and then think they need to voice that, which to me is just bizarre. I mean, I don't want to poop in somebody's mouth, and if I see scat content, it makes me gag, but I'm not going to go and comment underneath people who do scat contents posts and say, "Oh, I will puke if I have to do that," or whatever, So I just find it incredibly bizarre that people think if that's not their thing, or if it's too much for them, that they want to comment about it, So I find that bizarre, because we are a subculture that already experience a lot of prejudice. Even if you're into softcore BDSM, or people, there's a lot of prejudice about it. So I can't understand, if you're already in this subculture that experience so much prejudice, that you would then try and gatekeep or be prejudiced about other BDSM practices, which is performed between consensual adults. I just cannot understand that mindset at all. But I do experience less so than from if a vanilla person would see one of my caning pics who don't know anything about me, they would probably be upset. I don't know, but I don't understand it. Oh.
And what about gender and sadism? Do you find that there are different stereotypes or ideas about the female sadist versus the male sadist? And if so, how?
Maybe in the vanilla world, I don't know, but definitely not in the BDSM world. I'm well aware of the fact that I move in circles, which is basically only in the femdom world. So because I also don't like attending events, I don't have a lot to do with male domination. I'm not exposed to that. It's not something that interests me at all.
Right.
So I definitely exist in the BDSM realm, in a femdom bubble. So where female cruelty, female sadism, and female dominance is celebrated, welcomed, and the norm. So I don't experience any of that. No.
Okay, so let's talk about some more fun stuff. You film spanking scenes. I'd love to hear from you. What do you feel makes a great spanking scene for the viewer? What is it that spanking fetishists like to see?
Specifically regarding my own content, they love to see me delivering extremely hard judicial canings, which is very difficult to give to the audience the last few years, since blood censorship from the payment processors has become so very restrictive. So we are not allowed to show fake or real blood. Not that I would have showed any fake blood ever, but it's just bizarre that in a Quentin Tarantino movie or Hollywood movies, fake blood can be spraying all over the place, in shoot 'em up or action movies, etc. But as soon as it becomes pornography, you're not allowed to show even fake blood, So I find that very unfair, the censorship. But so it's very difficult for me, because if it's a judicial caning, that means it's so hard that every cane stroke is a cut, does open the skin, and blood is a part of it. So it's very difficult to give the audience exactly what they want, since I'm not allowed to show blood anymore. So I have to shoot cleverly with different angles and so on. And then also people just love seeing the role play traditionally associated with disciplinarians, and then also the type of spanking pornography I manufacture. So I love the traditional type of scenes, role play, and my audience also loves it. And that is teacher, governess, strict aunt, strict boss, prison officer, policewoman, that sort of thing. I love those types of role play, and I myself love seeing it, and then my audience also do.
Mm-hmm. And have you noticed the details of what people enjoy with spanking scenes change over time? Or do you feel like it's remained pretty similar?
It has remained pretty similar, but then also my audience do tend to generally, in terms of spanking content, definitely it's an older audience, and they do tend to like the traditional types of role play. So it's because spanking masochists specifically, I am very against corporal punishment on children. But school corporal punishment, when it was still legal, it's outlawed in most countries in the world, as you know. But it wasn't the case 40 years ago, and 30 years ago, and 50 years ago. So the audience specifically for spanking pornography of the more traditional sort is an older audience, and they love the same type of stuff. So they love role plays around the type of events that often triggered their masochism later in life, which was often teachers or police environments, or older, younger roles like strict aunt, governess, etc. People who might have spanked them, and were obviously, while it was happening, when they were a child, it wasn't pleasant, but later on in life, it somehow triggered into something erotic, often something erotic for them. So this, why I'm saying all of this is just to illustrate to you why I have an older audience, mostly specifically regarding spanking pornography, and they do tend to like the same types of role play, the ones I described just now, mostly.
Mm-hmm. By older, do you mean 40 plus, 50 plus?
Yes, 42 to 90.
Okay.
The oldest person I've gained was 89 years old. I've gained many people in their 80s. I have regular clients in their 80s, quite a few. I have many clients in their 70s, many in their 60s, and then it's usually 40 and above. But you do get younger masochists, but not as many corporal punishment masochists these days know that they are corporal punishment masochists, because it was not triggered by spanking in childhood. So I'm saying all of this, but you and your audience must realize that I am against it, but against corporal punishment on children. But there's no hiding the fact that it did trigger a lot of people's spanking masochism.
I'm curious, how is their masochism presenting, if it's not through spanking as such?
A lot of needle play, or rope. Being a rope bottom is not always. It's often not painless. So even being restrained can sometimes be a form, have some masochistic element to it. So a lot of people are into restraints and more sensation corporal punishment, so flogging, which can be sore, but it's mostly not sore. It's not. It doesn't hurt, or it doesn't hurt a lot. It's not like the cane. So a lot of people do start to experiment with soft sensation like corporal punishment practices, like wax play, hot wax being dripped onto you, or flogging. And then they may often realize that they want to take it a bit further.
Mm-hmm. Right. Fascinating. Now, another tradition that we have on the podcast is asking you a question sourced from one of the listeners. And today's listener question is, if there is a masochist submissive listening that is looking for a sadistic dom, what advice do you have for them for finding that connection?
Okay. Well, I hope that this person live in a country where there are a lot of BDSM practitioners. There are some countries where it's very difficult to find somebody, especially in countries in the north of Africa, and also in many Middle Eastern countries. But if you are lucky enough to live in a country where there are a lot of BDSM practitioners, just research the person properly. Make sure, because there are a lot of scammers as well, but also you can just end up with somebody who is not very skilled, or somebody who might not be compatible with you. And it is, especially in the beginning, pre-session, it is your responsibility as a bottom to research the person properly, to make sure that they are legit, you won't be scammed, and secondly, that you are very compatible, and also that the person is skilled in what you want them to deliver. So don't just look at their face or their body, to be crude, with your dick in your hand and just like what you see. You must also research and make sure that you will be safe and that you will have fun because you are compatible.
Great advice. Thank you. I'd love to hear from you about a peak experience that you've had in the disciplinarian world. What has been a scene that's ticked all of your boxes and left you deeply satisfied?
Well, just because I mentioned him earlier, there are many which I can't. There are many which I can mention, but just because we were talking about older masochists, I will mention the oldest person that I ever caned, and it was in 2022, and it was at a daytime event in the south of England, and there were, if I remember correctly, about 15 bottoms, and there were 2 disciplinarians, me and Miss Eve White, and this man arrived, 89 years old, 89 and a half then, and he was in a walker. He had a lot of mobility issues. He walked very slow in his walker, and looked. He wasn't a petite man or anything. He was quite tall, but obviously it makes somebody look frail, when they use a walker. And then the moment his clothing was off, and he bent over the spanking horse, all of that disappeared. You can't see his walker any longer. You can't see. So there was nothing frail about him any longer. And then his bum was ready, and the corporal punishment started on him. He took a strapping, which started at about medium severity and then became quite hard. A thorough and lengthy strapping, which warmed him up properly. And then he took a magnificent, very hard caning. Not that it's a competition or anything, it doesn't matter who took it harder or softer or whatever. That's not what I'm trying to say. Everybody takes it at the level that they're comfortable with. But he did take the hardest caning of the day. And then obviously everybody else was watching everybody else's punishments, So it was a great atmosphere. It was a lot of fun. And he was just absolutely wonderful. And I just loved the fact that, when you see somebody and you put them in a box, so he's with a walker and he looks frail and whatever, and then he's not. And I just wish, especially because ageism is so incredibly widespread in worldwide in our society, it just makes me so angry. I detest ageism, and I just love the fact that for that afternoon he did not have to experience any ageism, because none of the things that were obvious about him, because a walker is a big thing, you can't help but notice it. And even I couldn't help thinking, he looks frail, and would he be okay, and whatever beforehand. And then all of that disappeared, not just for me, but for him as well, and the other people present. So I just love the fact that that would always be a very special session for me.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, ageism sucks, and yeah, our erotic lives don't stop just because our bodies age. So thank you for highlighting that.
Yes.
I'd like to ask, what do you hope listeners take away from hearing about your relationship with discipline and pain?
Well, I just hope maybe if you're not necessarily into spanking, that you might have learned something, or that you found it interesting, and yes.
And if you had to sum up your sadistic identity in one word, what would it be and why?
My sadistic identity specifically would probably be bottomless, if I have to say one word, because of how deeply sadistic I am and how intensely pleasurable it is for me. I would say bottomless, probably.
I love it. I'm sure there are plenty of listeners who would love to find out more about you. Where is the best place to explore your work and what you have to offer?
So my website is very easy, MistressBaton.com. And then I'm on FetLife also, MistressBaton, just one word, and Twitter as well. And then I'm on a subscription site called Loyal Fans, and I sell my clips on many sites like Fab House Clips for Sale. But if you want to not just consume the content and read my writing, etc., it would be Twitter or FetLife would be your best bet.
Amazing. Well, I'd like to thank you for being here today and sharing your erotic realm with us, MistressBaton.
Thank you very much for the invite, Em, and it was so nice to chat to you. And I absolutely loved your questions and your meticulous preparation and the wonderful quotes and research article you brought up.
Thank you. I'm Em, and this has been the Erotic Realm podcast. Thank you for listening to the Erotic Realm. If this episode stirred something in you, please take a moment to follow the show, leave a rating, or write a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps more people find the show and brings visibility to this deeper conversation about eroticism and self-understanding. I'd also like to invite you to dive deeper into the psychology of desire, including my writing, research, and upcoming courses over at psychologyofdesire.com. And if you want the full experience, join thousands of curious minds on my Substack at psychologyofdesire.substack.com, where I release the Psychology of Desire case files, behind-the-scene thoughts, and intimate reflections every week, plus more. Until next time, stay curious, stay embodied, and keep exploring. Also, as always, stay perverted.